Okay, let's unpack this. For the last few years, the whole conversation around AI has been about innovation, right?
Absolutely. The power of Gen AI, the speed, the raw capability.
But if you're actually running a big organization, the real problem, the bottleneck, it isn't building the AI, it's managing it.
Exactly. We have to shift the focus from, the technological excitement
Right.
to the enterprise structure.
Right.
This deep dive is really about that mandatory scaffolding you need to deploy AI systems, whether you build them or buy them responsibly, securely, and ethically.
So we're talking about pure governance, risk, and controls today.
That's it. We're looking at the fundamental structure, the boundaries, the responsibilities,
Yeah.
and how you mitigate the risks that AI just naturally introduces.
And the sources you've shared give us a really comprehensive blueprint. It's like an action plan for getting an organization AI ready. So to get smart on this fast, we have to start where they do, right at the top,
Establishing the rules.
establishing the foundational rules.
And the first hurdle for any organization is just answering a really basic question. Are we even ready to govern this technology? AI readiness means integrating AI management into the very DNA of the enterprise.
It's not just an IT task.
No, not at all. It's a systemic structural change.
And that kind of change demands clear roles. So who sets the tone? Our sources are very clear that the governing body, the board, the C-suite, they have to set the strategic direction. They define the risk appetite.
But you need a group to translate that high-level strategy into action.
And that's the AI steering committee.
That's their function. This committee oversees implementation, they allocate resources, and this is critical, they create the AI charter.
Think of the charter as the constitution for your AI.
That's a perfect way to put it. It defines the scope, what risks are acceptable, and what's, completely off the table.
I like that distinction because it's not just abstract policy, it's driven by the bottom line. You have to quantify the need with a clear business case.
Right, focusing on cost-benefit analysis and a real achievable return on investment, ROI.
If you can't define the scope and the expected ROI, you shouldn't be building the system. You're just playing with tech at that point.
Precisely. And when you're formalizing all this, you can't just ignore what's already there. The sources mention adapting established frameworks like COBIT.
The IT governance standard for decades.
Exactly. And integrating it with newer structures like the Four Pillars framework, which is designed specifically for AI.
Leveraging existing infrastructure is key. But here's the reality check, right? The speed of AI development has just blown past legislation.
It really has.
Enterprises have to comply with existing laws, sure, but the material is very explicit about the huge problem of gaps in regulatory coverage.
And that gap, that's what forces the ethical core of your AI strategy to become a mandatory part of governance. It can't be an optional feature.
Because the law hasn't caught up.
So organizations have to self-regulate in these areas.
Okay, this is where it gets super practical for you, the listener. Whether you decide to build your AI or buy it, your policy has to cover some core ethical components. Let's dig into the 5 key areas the sources say every policy has to have.
And we have to move beyond just theory here. Organizations are mandated to address bias and fairness, both in the data and in how the model operates.
Okay, so bias and fairness. What's next?
Transparency and explainability. Users have to understand how a decision was reached. Then you need policies for trust and safety, for protecting intellectual property.
IP is a huge one.
Huge. And finally, you have to analyze the broader impacts. We're talking human rights and environmental impact.
Now hold on. That's a massive mandate. Human rights and environmental impact. Realistically, how can an enterprise actually quantify those things when they're deploying, say, an internal fraud detection system?
It's challenging, but it's necessary. The sources mandate that you have policies to address them. For a fraud model, the human rights impact could be about, algorithmic redlining.
Unfairly denying services based on proxy data.
Exactly. So the enterprise has to define those acceptable boundaries and who is accountable before you deploy. It forces you to think critically about where the model's job ends and human recourse begins.
So that upfront planning is what separates a trustworthy AI deployment from a catastrophic one.
That's the whole ballgame.
So we've set the ethical and strategic boundaries, but how do we enforce them? I mean, that requires total clarity on what assets and what data could actually break those rules.
Which takes us right into asset management. You have to have a complete AI asset identification and inventory.
And not just a list of names.
No, this needs detailed documentation. What are the model's objectives, its procedures? You even use things like surveys and interviews to make sure the documentation matches what's happening in reality.
But the AI itself is useless without its fuel, which is the data. So you also have to master data inventory and management.
And we're looking for data flow diagrams and, crucially, meticulous tracking of data lineage.
What does data lineage mean in a practical sense?
It's simply the history of the data. Where did it come from? How was it cleaned, transformed, modified? Who touched it last? If your AI makes a bad call, you need to trace that data pipeline all the way back to the source to find the failure.
Without that lineage, any investigation is basically impossible.
Impossible.
What's fascinating here is the focus on data challenges that are pretty unique to AI systems. It's not just about having a lot of data, is it?
That's right. You see problems like data lag. If your model was trained on 2022 supply chain data, but it's operating in the chaos of the 2024 global economy,
The predictions are useless.
completely irrelevant. That lag destroys value. You also face data scarcity, so not having enough diverse samples, and vitally ensuring data balancing to fight bias.
And to help with transparency on the outside, there's this concept of model cards.
I love this concept. Think of a model card as the nutritional label for your AI.
Okay, I like that.
It gives you a clear overview of the model's intended use, its limitations, the data it was trained on, its performance metrics. It's a key tool for building trust with anyone outside the organization.
And all this operational clarity, it connects directly to AI trust, and from there to comprehensive AI risk identification.
If we pull the lens back to the bigger picture, the regulatory world is trying to provide roadmaps. Our sources really detail two primary and pretty contrasting approaches that global companies have to deal with.
The NIST framework from the US and the EU's AI Act.
Exactly. The NIST Artificial Intelligence Risk Management Framework, or AI-RMF, and the European Union AI Act.
We can't just gloss over this. What are the key differences that organizations need to get right?
The difference is really fundamental. The NIST AI-RMF is voluntary. It's flexible. It's outcome-focused.
It's a set of best practices, a guidebook.
A guidebook is the perfect word for it. But the EU AI Act, well, that's a whole different beast. It's mandatory and it's classification-focused.
Well, it has teeth.
Oh, it has serious teeth. It categorizes AI based on risk unacceptable, high, limited, and minimal. And it assigns very strict compliance rules based on that category. If your system is high risk, you are facing intense scrutiny.
So NIST gives you the tools for good management, but the EU Act sets a legally binding bar, especially for high-stakes stuff.
That's it. For a global company, you can't just pick one. You have to meet the EU's mandatory baseline where it applies, while using the NIST framework to build strong internal practices everywhere else.
But no matter what framework you use, the core risk responses are still the classics, right? Except avoid, mitigate, or transfer the risk.
They are, but mitigation in AI is pretty unique. You're not just patching software. Mitigation might mean retraining a model with new data to reduce bias, or putting in operational constraints, like weight limits, to stop it from going haywire.
So the solution is often about manipulating the data and the algorithm itself. That's a whole new type of control.
A whole new dimension. And that mitigation has to account for the threat landscape. You have your standard technical threats, like adversarial attacks.
Trying to trick the model.
Right, but you also have non-technical threats, insider misuse, or just the unintended consequences of putting a model out in the world.
Plus now we have the danger of AI-enabled threats, where AI is the weapon.
The technology itself is used to automate fraud, generate deepfakes, launch massive cyber attacks. The threat surface has just exploded.
This brings up a critical point, because most companies are buying AI, not building it. So how do you handle that supply chain risk? The sources push hard for an AI shared responsibility model.
That model requires you to clearly draw the line between the duties of the AI deployer, that's you, and the AI provider. The provider is on the hook for the model's foundational security and data quality.
But the deployer.
The deployer is responsible for the environment it runs in, the data you feed it, and ensuring it's used ethically in the real world. You can't outsource your ultimate ethical or compliance responsibility just because you bought the system.
You're still accountable.
Always. Now, before we jump into the specific controls, we have to acknowledge how diverse AI is. The sources cover all the different types, narrow versus general AI, generative versus predictive models, but the main takeaway is that each one requires a unique control strategy. Security is not one size fits all here.
And that complexity is why securing the entire AI lifecycle is so important. The sources lay out 7 distinct phases. It starts with plan and design.
Goes through data collection, model building, testing, deployment, operation, and monitoring,
Right.
and all the way to finally retiring the system.
Retire and decommission.
And the one consistent security principle across all 7 of those phases is AI secure by design. Security has to be baked in from the start, not bolted on at the end.
You have to think about the risk at each stage. The controls for data collection are obviously different from the ones for monitoring a live system.
Absolutely.
So what are the critical modern control concepts we really need to be focusing on right now?
First, applying zero-trust architecture to AI access. We know the principle, never trust, always verify.
Right.
But for AI, this means rigorously controlling who can access the training data, who can call the model's API, and what governance boundaries are between different AI services.
And second, you have the danger of shadow AI. This is just the new shadow IT.
It is, but it's more dangerous. Shadow IT was when employees downloaded unauthorized software. Shadow AI is when they use some unvetted generative model to process confidential corporate data.
Or worse, they start building their own little models using company data completely outside of your governance framework.
And because AI systems learn, the danger of shadow AI is so much greater. It can contaminate your data and violate compliance rules almost instantly. You have to control that actively.
That contamination risk seems to mandate really comprehensive auditing.
100%. You had to mandate AI audits and traceability across the entire life cycle. And for your high-risk autonomous systems, the role of the human in the loop, or HITL, is crucial.
That's the failsafe.
That is the fail-safe. HITL ensures that for critical decisions, medical diagnostics, autonomous vehicle maneuvers, a human is built into the workflow for oversight and intervention. It's a key control for safety.
But governance is useless if you can't handle a failure. So for preparedness, you need to run tabletop exercises for AI-specific failures.
What happens if your model suddenly starts generating racist output or gets hit with a denial of service attack?
The traditional incident response still applies: containment, eradication, recovery. But the response itself is evolving.
Yeah, we're seeing the rise of AI-powered incident response, where AI tools actually automate the containment and analysis. It offers huge benefits in speed, but it also creates its own challenges. Can you really trust an AI to secure itself during a crisis?
And finally, managing AI isn't a one-and-done thing. You have to implement continuous monitoring. And the single most important concept to track over time is drift.
Drift is essentially the slow decay of relevance. The world changes. New competitors, shifting economics, different user behaviors, and your AI, which was trained to be perfect 6 months ago, becomes less accurate because it hasn't seen this new reality.
So it's not a security issue, it's a relevance issue.
It's both. If your model drifts enough, its outcomes become unreliable, and that introduces huge operational and compliance risk. Tracking that drift, along with other key risk indicators and using threat intelligence, ensures your governance framework adapts. You cannot set it and forget it.
So what does this all mean? We started by saying that managing AI is harder than building it, and I think this roadmap proves it. And AI is only as safe, reliable, and compliant as its governance.
That's the bottom line.
The real complexity is in managing not just the tech security, but the data lineage, that ethical core, and keeping tight control across the whole dynamic life cycle of the model.
You know, what really stands out in this material is the emphasis on something that goes beyond a technical checklist. It's this idea of societal adaptation. If enterprises are now mandated to track ethics, transparency, human rights, and environmental impact through formal policies, the ultimate question for you, the learner, becomes this: how does an organization actually measure the success of its adaptation to a world driven by these autonomous systems?
It's not just about ROI anymore.
It can't be. It requires defining success not just in terms of efficiency or reduced costs, but in terms of sustained, trustworthy outcomes and positive impact. And that's the real frontier. It goes beyond controls and governance. It demands critical thinking at the highest possible level of leadership.